Hey everyone, Doc Allie here to discuss surviving tough rotations and how to get the most out of them. Stay tuned. It's been a 4-month sabbatical. I know you guys are frustrated with me because I said it would never happen again unless I got sick, and then I never ended up actually getting sick. But I took a nice little step back from social media as an all, so you can't really get mad at me. Personally, I just needed the space and the mental headspace to survive my crazy rotation. So we'll talk about how I transitioned from a third-year medical student to a current fourth-year medical student. In another video, we'll talk about the surgery core rotation in detail. But in this video, we're going to talk about, in general, when you have that tough rotation, maybe you don't even like the rotation, how are you going to get the most out of it? How are you going to survive it? We're going to talk about that now. So some of these rotations that you're going to go into are going to have the easiest schedule, like show up at 7, leave at 3, maybe even earlier, maybe even starting late. I don't know what it's going to be. But if you end up at one of these rotations where they expect you to be putting out 11-hour shifts, overnights, or 24-hour shifts, here's my advice for you. Let's start with the 24-hour shifts because I think that was the craziest wake-up call for me. As a medical school student, especially having relatively nice hours prior to this rotation, I never thought that 24-hour shifts were even legal. Like, I thought that we were still on the 18-hour limit. But apparently we bumped back up to 24, and it's very hard to survive a 24. So here's my tips. I would normally drink about my 3rd cup of coffee for the day before my 24-hour shift started. And you might say that is bad advice. You do not advise people, especially as a future physician, to drink 3 cups of coffee a day. However, I promise you these residents are drinking more than 3 cups, so do not judge me too harshly. However, the only time I would drink 3 cups of coffee was typically on my 24-hour days. Now, my schedule meant I woke up at 4 a.m. I drank a cup of coffee. About 9 a.m., maybe if it was my 24-hour day, around 11 or 12, I'd have my 2nd cup of coffee. Right before my 24-hour shift officially started around 4 or 5 p.m., I would have my 3rd cup of coffee, and that would be it. I would call it that's enough. Another thing that I picked up during the 24-hour shift is if you sit down and sit still for too long, you're going to fall asleep. So it's always best to stay busy, stay active, stay walking around. Do you need me to do some rounds? Do you need me to go ask a patient something? Do you need me to do something? Any way to keep moving keeps your mind and body awake, and you'll make it. Now, I've never had to consistently stay up completely 24 hours. I made it to the 22-hour mark, and by the 22-hour mark, I was like, man, I don't even need it. But the resident said, you can go lay down if you want to. Another thing I picked up is how to be able to sleep on a very uncomfortable cot, but that's nothing you need tips on. That's just my experience has taught me I can sleep anywhere now when I'm tired enough. So that's the 24-hour shift. 12-hour shifts, you're gonna think I'm crazy, I think are a lot harder than 24-hour shifts because with 24, you've been running the whole day. Typically, if you have a 12-hour overnight, you try to sleep throughout the day. So that's another thing I would say is like with your 24-hour shift, you don't have to prep. Like obviously don't go to bed super late the night before, but you don't have to like stay asleep from the second you get home until it's time for you to pop up. And then the next day, however, after your 24-hour shift, sleep as long as you want to. I would normally get home around 5-ish, and I'd pop back up around maybe 11-ish. So I'd get like another 6 hours of sleep or so, but I wouldn't stay in bed the whole day. I would take care of things that I needed to take care of, but don't feel pressured to like have a whole to-do list on your post-call day because Lord knows you're gonna be exhausted. So back to the 12-hour shift, I found it harder because I would prep, I would sleep in, I would try to take it easy before, and then I'd get there and I'm falling asleep. So I'm going to insert a little clip of what me and my rotation / schoolmate / friend would do when it would get to that point where we're ready to fall asleep. Because especially what really sucks is when you have a 24 or overnight that's really slow. Now, it might be worse when it's crazy and things are popping off for you to do something every 5 minutes because you're like, well, I can never rest. But at the same time, if you are sitting there for 5 hours with nothing anything to do, it's pretty crazy too, and it really sucks. So what me and my rotation mate did was we had a dance off, and that was what helped us to stay awake for the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. If you have an 11 to 12 hour daily call time, then I would say the best thing to do is obviously stick to a bedtime. Try to make sure you're practicing that good nightly hygiene. And when you're having like breaks or moments where you're able to get some studying in, whether it's flashcards, whether it's questions, because at the end of the rotation, again, I'll talk about this in more detail in my surgery video, but at the end of the rotation, I was doing 40 questions a day. But I didn't allow the crazy schedule or when I got home, and I didn't want to do too much to interfere with that. So if there was a moment where I had 10 minutes to do 10 questions, I'd get those in right then. And then maybe during lunchtime, another 10. And then by the end of the day, I'd only have 20 questions to do at home. Because you're really gonna want that time once you get home to just take to yourself, whether it's to detach from the world and watch Netflix, or it's to exercise, clean, eat, cook, whatever it is. Just make sure you're balancing and using your time wisely. Of course, time management. You know, that's the one thing that they will drill into your head in medical school is time management. So this was a suggestion from my friend, is to discuss what do you do when you hate your rotation. Now, I would never go so far as to say I hated any of my rotations, but of course there was one that I wasn't so thrilled about, and that shall not be named. However, the thing you never want to do is show up with a face that says, I don't want to be here. You never want to be unprofessional. Just because this is not what you think you want to go do for the rest of your life, and you do not want to apply for a residency in this specialty, do not act like you don't care, because anybody can see this. Anybody can write you a bad eval because of this, and you never know who's watching. So you might rub the wrong attending or program the wrong way because of what you did in XYZ rotation versus what they're saying you did in the rotation that you're trying to apply for. You know what I'm saying? So just be a good student no matter what. Always show up with and put your best foot forward. And this will also help you in, like, if you're staying active and staying engaged, when you're reading your book knowledge, you're able to combine it with your clinical knowledge, and it's like a volcano goes off inside your head, and like it's like things that you didn't think you would actually witness, you get to witness. And it helps when you're studying, because when it comes time for the question, you're going to be like, oh, I remember this, I saw this at the hospital, or oh, I know that diagnosis because I saw it in the clinic, and it comes together. So even if you hate this rotation, treat it like you're applying for residency there. And the last tidbit of information I'm going to give might not be necessary for some of you guys. Some of you guys are already a few rotations in, but maybe you're a few rotations in and you're not getting the best evals or something you would hope for, or maybe you're about to start clerkships and you don't really know what to do. So obviously, always be professional. Like I was saying earlier, don't show up and act like I don't care, I don't want to be here. Don't do that, please. Always show up being professional, being on time, being courteous, being kind, being humble. Some medical students fail to acknowledge the importance of humility, so always remain humble that you are a humble medical school student, okay? On top of this, make sure that you know what's going on. You won't always, especially in the beginning, know what's going on. Like in OBGYN, that was a whole new language I had to learn. So staying on top of your studies helps you to be able to answer questions. I know that there's a lot of active recall when it comes to residents and attendings. I'm gonna shoot you a question, I need an answer back in 10 seconds or less. If you can't do that, then you don't need to be here. Know basic stuff. Like if they ask you, what constitutes as preeclampsia? What constitutes as acute mesenteric ischemia or bowel obstruction? Know the basics of whatever rotation you're going on and then build upon that knowledge with them. Sometimes there will be questions that you don't know the answer to, and that's more of like they don't expect you to know the answer to. It's more of like a teaching moment for them. But if they're continuously asking you questions, don't be the student who doesn't know anything, because you're not only representing medical students, you're representing your school, and you're representing anyone who might come after you. So leave a good impression. On top of my note of being professional, be respectful to every worker. If they are the secretary, if they're the nurse, the tech, the PA, whoever it is, treat them as you would the attending with the utmost respect, because everyone plays a responsibility and a role in the patient's healthcare delivery. So be kind, be courteous, and you never know when that might actually come back as a blessing for you. And lastly, but the most important of all, is to remember why we're here. And I pray you're not here for the paycheck, because it won't be worth it in the end. But if we are here for the patient, know your patients. If you have to do a lot of patient presentations, make sure you know your patient like you know yourself. But on top of that, your bedside manner and your healthcare delivery are very essential too, and that can come out on your eval. How do you interact with patients? Do you treat them like another number, or do you treat them like they're your family member? And I will never forget, at my first hospital I rotated at, they had us wear a little badge or whatever, and it would say, I'm going to treat my patients like, and you would fill it in. So you could put your grandma, you could put your best friend, you could put your mom, whoever it is, because that's who the patient is. They are someone's grandma, someone's best friend. So always treat your patient as if they're your family, and always know that you're not too high to do certain tasks. So if a patient asks, can you help me to get up and do this? Of course, there's always safety measures. So if you're not trained in how to ambulate a patient who's high fall risk, maybe don't do that. Maybe say, I can go get someone to help you. But if it's a simple task like, can you get me a blanket? Oh, let me call your nurse. No, go get the patient a blanket. You're not too high. If they need help putting socks on, you can do that. Just put some gloves on. You'll be fine. That's another part about just being a humble medical student, is not thinking that you're that attending yet. And even when you are that attending, you don't have to be stuck up. If you found anything I said in this video to be helpful or useful, please hit that like button. Always hit that subscribe button. I have some more content coming out soon. I promise that it will be coming. I can't promise that it will be on the month, but if you have that subscribe already going, you'll know when the new content is out. I have hopes for more interviews. When step 2 is knocked out, I'll have my advice for that. And we'll talk about upcoming match process, electives, all of the good stuff. So stay tuned. Until next time, guys.